Started back in October. He's in our office as well. And then Todd Jensen, most likely you all know Todd. He's been here for a long time. Yep. And then we have Adam Weigel with zoning. He's here, the administrator. And then we've got 2 DACCAP staff that are specialized in farmland preservation and tax stuff.
Yeah, the farmland preservation tax.
So most of it's going to be from their mouths. So I'm gonna. There will be an interactive thing that I'll give you dots, and you'll come up and put your land on the map to kind of know where in the county you guys all coming from, and to see what we can come up with for that. So I guess I'll turn it over to Wednesday and Tim.
Hi, my name is Wednesday Coy. I run the Farmland Preservation Program here for the state of Wisconsin.
And I'm Tim Jackson. I work on the program with Wednesday as a planning and zoning specialist.
Yeah, so thanks for having us today. We're going to be talking about the Farmland Preservation Program a little bit, but focusing mainly in on agricultural enterprise areas. So, just to give you guys a brief agenda for what we're going to talk about today, which I promise we'll get done in like an hour, even though I know this looks like a lot. We'll give an introduction to the program, kind of talk about the background of it. We'll talk a little bit about the farmland preservation planning process, since the county just recently went through that process to replan, and then we'll do a little exercise with everybody in the room. Then we'll go into what an agricultural enterprise area is and what farmland preservation agreements are. We'll talk about the farmland preservation tax credits, what's required for claiming those tax credits, what those tax credits are. Then we'll go into conservation compliance for farmland preservation. We have a landowner here who is a Farmland Preservation Program participant, who is already in compliance with those standards over from Lafayette County. Is that correct? So we'll have him come up and share his experience with the program a little bit, and then we'll go in and talk about how to petition for an AEA and what that process looks like.
All right, so to start, I'll just sort of explain a little bit of the history behind the program and sort of how we're getting to where we are today. So the program has been around in some way, shape, or form since the 70s, so quite a long time, in the state of Wisconsin. The entire time it has utilized land use plans, so comprehensive plans, what are now known as farmland preservation plans, has been persistent through that entire time period. The purpose of the program is, of course, in the name, to preserve farmland, but also to achieve some of the state's soil and water conservation goals, keeping our soils in place and our waters clean. So it does that by providing a foundation through these farmland preservation plans to achieve all those goals. It does this through voluntary incentives for compliance with what we call the state soil and water conservation standards, which are a set of standards for agricultural practices that the state sets according to science and lots of committees and experts. Through these incentives, the program provides additional tools to help support farmers in the local farm economy, both through tax breaks and then any sort of economic partnership aspects that like an ag enterprise area might bring forth. There are 2 main participation routes in this program. One is through our farmland preservation zoning, which we can talk about a little bit today if anybody's interested, but we will be focusing more on the agricultural enterprise areas aspect of it. So just here's a quick snapshot of the current farmland preservation program presence in the state. As you can see, covers quite a bit of the state. These sort of light green areas, if you can see it, are where those farmland preservation plans, which are the foundational aspect of the program, are active. So we cover all but a handful of counties in the state, including, of course, Greene County. The blue areas where we have our certified zoning, one of those 2 routes to participate that I told you about. And then the red areas are our agricultural enterprise areas, which are the other option. So just a quick snapshot of the statistics for this program. Last year, statewide, there were just over 10,000 individual landowners claiming this tax credit, of course, participating in the program, on about 2 million total acres. And those would be in either the blue or the red areas spread across there. So to sort of understand how the program gets implemented through either zoning or our ag enterprise areas, you have to understand the Farmland Preservation Plan. And like Wednesday said, Greene County just finished their process here, recertifying their next 10-year Farmland Preservation Plan. They are 10-year documents, planning for the next 15, so they're updated at least every decade to ensure that they're reflecting the most up-to-date information in that county. What are the development, housing trends, farm economy, market trends, etc. This is the foundational step for the program, so nothing else can happen, no certified zoning, no ag enterprise areas can happen unless there's a certified farmland preservation plan in place. Because it really establishes sort of, we recognize these lands are agricultural, and these are what we're going to use as the base for the other aspects of the program. It also contains a lot of policy decisions, what are the local goals, recognizing that agriculture is different in most counties in Wisconsin. Greene County is vastly different than Marathon County or than Douglas County, etc. So these plans are really personalized to each county to be able to recognize what the market is like. The plans themselves don't carry any binding decisions with them. They're more guidance documents, so they're not, Greene County is not required to necessarily do anything that they lay out in the plan, but if they want to, it has to be done according to that plan. A big component of this plan are the maps. This is an example map here from Juneau County. Greene County has maps just like these that they just finished making, but basically the maps are where they identify areas of farmland preservation and areas of non-farmland preservation. And those areas are drawn up according to the county's criteria that they select in accordance with the state standards. But basically, what land will be still in agricultural use in the next 15 years, or what land supports agricultural use. So this can include environmental areas, wetlands, corridors. It's not just farm fields. It can include farmsteads, etc. Because we really want to protect blocks of land, not just individual fields here and there. Those criteria are, of course, supposed to be objective, rather than just individual landowner preference in or out of the plan. The county's supposed to take an objective look and say, this land will most likely be in continued farm use. And these plans are only prepared by counties. No towns are authorized to certify their own versions of these plans, so the county works with the towns and other municipalities that may want to be in this program to prepare this plan. Here's just a snapshot of the current, recently certified Greene County farmland preservation areas. All those light green are areas that the county has said these are probably going to stay in farmland use for the next 10 to 15 years. So when we talk about areas to participate in the program today, these are the areas that are eligible to either choose, ag enterprise area, or if we talk about zoning later on, go that route.
So at this time, we'll take a little break and have everybody come up and mark your land on the map, so we know kind of where everybody's coming from. Like, we want to know, is there big interest in the southeast or in the northwest or all over the county? So if you guys could come up and kind of mark your parcels with dots, I'd appreciate it. Okay, got it. You want to come up and help somebody if they can't find their place? You feel like that covered all the land that you own? Well, yeah, I got more than that. If you need a couple to cover your land, that's fine. Make it really Yep. No.
That's pretty good.
You need more? You probably have more, you guys got land all over the place.
I could put on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just put it on the building.
Well, do it on like, the majority of your trucks.
Well,
It says to do it more.
what's in that area. It's not like, we don't know how,
We're around
yeah. Some of them are nice.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Thank you very much. Now we'll continue.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about what an agricultural enterprise area is. These are kind of the state's answer to what do we do if we don't have local zoning, or we don't have the desire to implement zoning, or we want to enhance our local zoning? What do we do without having broad-reaching impacts on a whole group of people? How do we let individuals decide if we buy into this program? And then also, how do we strengthen, you know, our local goals and community for agricultural preservation and conservation in general? So this is where we came up with the agricultural enterprise areas back in 2009 when they redid the entire program. So at its core, these are like a district boundary. It's an area that is determined by the community to say, hey, everything within this boundary is important to our local agricultural community, our local heritage, and our local economy, and we think that this is, you know, protecting this area is beneficial to the state as well. This is done through a petition process, and then the state, or DADCAP, the secretary there, designates it. On its own, an agricultural enterprise area doesn't have any land use restrictions. It doesn't have any voluntary compliance with the program. It doesn't have any compulsory participation. All it says is that landowners within this boundary have the option to voluntarily sign up with a farmland preservation agreement and then claim the farmland preservation tax credit. So what's really nice about that is that it works really well with areas that already have local zoning, that maybe don't have the capacity at this point in time to adopt a farmland preservation zoning district, or they already have a farmland preservation zoning district, but landowners want to achieve a higher tax credit rate, or zoning is just not an option at this point in time in the community. These are collaborative petition processes, meaning that landowners come together with local agricultural groups, and then governmental agencies in the town and county to say, hey, we all support this petition, we're going to put it all together, and then present it to the state. So it creates a sense of community and a sense of collaboration to build upon those local and county-wide conservation and preservation goals. So the benefits of an AEA is that, first and foremost, it allows the landowners within the boundaries of the AEA the opportunity to apply or enroll their land into a farmland preservation agreement. That's going to be the number one goal for a lot of folks, is to get eligibility to claim the farmland preservation tax credit and participate through that program. The other nice part about this program is that it has a clustering effect of protected farms. So we find that when we have more farms that are committed to agriculture for long-term periods of time, through those farmland preservation agreements, it creates a stronger local economy and a stronger commitment to agriculture or conservation within a specific area. If you're getting more folks in compliance with the soil and water conservation standards, you're going to have better water quality because you'll have less soil runoff. You're going to have better less nutrient leachate into the groundwater. You're going to see those benefits within that localized area where that AEA has been placed and where people are. We see a lot of these agricultural enterprise areas are also being used as a way for communities to express express their local heritage and their local community to kind of reinforce that, especially in areas where they feel like there's a lot of development pressure from new residential communities coming in. We see this in a lot of areas where we've seen people move in from, you know, cities nearby, and they're encroaching in onto the agricultural community, and maybe they didn't grow up there. They don't have an idea of what it's like to live near a dairy and the smells that come with that, or what it's like to actually live near a cornfield when they're out there spraying manure. So we see that folks are using these as kind of a way to celebrate their agricultural heritage and have additional ways to protect that through these agreements and through the AEA establishing it and saying, this is what we want to see in our community, is more ag, less residential development. The last thing that's really cool about this is that it layers really well with other programs that are happening within the community. So if you have a producer-led watershed group, this pairs really well with a lot of the initiatives that are already going on with those communities. You know, it can help enhance what those programs, or what those folks are already doing with their programming, to kind of bring it up to the next level, while also getting that extra incentive through that tax credit. So we're finding these programs end up, you know, being really good partners with each other without overlapping or one being more important than the other. They work really well in tandem. So this is an example of what an agricultural enterprise area boundary looks like, and I realize that maybe that's not so great looking up on the screen, but this is actually the Pecatonica AEA over in Lafayette County. It covers one whole township for the most part, and this light gray area here are all the areas that are eligible to enroll in a farmland preservation agreement. It follows the farmland preservation plan area for that township. So the areas that are in white, that are in the center of the boundary, have been unplanned for whatever reason. It's either because it's currently development, maybe it's commercial property, maybe it's other property that the county determined not conductive with agricultural use. But this is an example of what one of those AEAs looks like. So farmland preservation agreements are the way that you would participate in the Farmland Preservation Program within an agricultural enterprise area. So just having land in the AEA doesn't mean that you have to participate in the program. It doesn't mean that the state's going to make you write a nutrient management plan or you know, come into compliance. This is a voluntary program. So if you wanted to participate in the program voluntarily, this is how you would do it. If you had participated in the program prior to 2009, you probably are familiar with the super long-term agreements that they used to be between 20 and 30 years. We've reduced that down to 10 years. There's no obligation once you enroll in the program to remain in the program after that 10-year period. You're cut clean and cut free. So we don't put any liens on any people's properties anymore. We don't have any release fees or anything. Once the program is done, once that contract is over, you're done, and then you can make the decision if you want to re-enroll or if you just want to cut clean and move on past the program. These do have land use controls associated with them, but again, this is a voluntary program. So when you're signing into a farmland preservation agreement, you're agreeing to keep your land in agricultural and agricultural related uses or open natural space uses. So what that means is that you can continue to perform, you know, regular agricultural practices on your farm. Even some specialty crops are allowed within our realm of agricultural use. Managed forest law is allowed in there. Any farm buildings that you have, that's all good. Your homestead, all of that. Even if you have housing for migrant farm workers or anything like that, that's all covered. Anything that's associated with the farm is covered. What wouldn't be covered is if you have like a machine shed that you run a mechanic shop out of, or you have a side business building cabinets and you create a new building to house that. Those are the kinds of things that are allowed within a farmland preservation agreement. But what's nice about the agreement is that you don't have to enroll a whole parcel. You can choose what you want to enroll in land. So if you only want to enroll your farm fields, you can just enroll your farm fields. If you want to enroll everything except a 5-acre lot that isn't already cut out, because you know in the next 10 years you're going to want to sell that to a neighbor to the new residence, you can do that at the time of enrolling into an agreement. You also have the option of releasing lands from an agreement after you've enrolled it, but there is a monetary fee with that. And I will say the fee in Greene County is a little bit higher because the soils and the agricultural lands here are valued so high. But it is always an option if you decide you need to take a couple of acres out halfway through your contract. The other thing is that it does require you to meet the state soil and water conservation standards while you're in the agreement. So doing your nutrient management plan, keeping your barn yard up to standards and all of that. Once you have your agreement, you're eligible to start claiming farmland preservation tax credit the year you sign your agreement. So let's say you guys were to petition for an ADA this year, starting in tax year 2026, you would be able to start claiming that tax credit.
So the way that the Farmland Preservation Tax Credit works is it is a refundable state income tax credit. It does not affect any local property taxes. It is basically a credit applied against your state income taxes due. It is paid from appropriations in the state's general fund, which is of course funded from income taxes from the state. So basically you're lessening your burden. So not everybody would necessarily get a check in the mail. Let's say that you were due, $2,000 from this tax credit, but you owe $3,000 for whatever reason. Your due would just be reduced to $1,000. And likewise, if you were due to receive a refund that year, the $2,000 would be added on top of that. So you might get a larger check in the mail. It is a flat acre-based rate. So our current rates were just increased a couple of years ago. They are now $10 per acre for any land in an FP agreement or lands that are participating through zoning. That rate climbs to $12.50 per acre if you are in both. So being that it's a per acre credit, there is no technical minimum or maximum number of acres you can claim on. There's no you need to have at least 10 acres of a farm, or you can't claim past 500 acres because it's too much. There's no minimum or maximum, but there is what we call a gross farm revenue requirement, and that has been around for the duration of the program's current form since 2009. The amount has stayed the same, and that is $6,000 in gross receipts in that tax year you are claiming it on, or if you were right on the edge, you might fluctuate, $18,000 in the previous three. So that those are gross receipts, not like net profits or anything. You just have to make at least $6,000 in sales. So you might have someone on a specialty farm that can meet that requirement on 10 or 15 acres, or someone that is well exceeding that on a 200, 300 acre plot of land.
Does that also apply to landowners that rent their home out?
So this is a land ownership based program, meaning that only the owners of that land are able to claim the credit. If you rent your land to someone else to operate on it, the operator cannot claim the credit. It would be the landowners.
The receipts from the rent qualify.
Correct. Yeah.
Receipts
No, not for rent.
from the
Sorry.
rent itself, like rent paid does not qualify. It would be whatever your renter can produce on the land they're renting from you.
Yeah.
So the way it works typically in a renting situation is that the landowner is still responsible for proving, testifying that their renter is making at least that $6,000 in gross receipts. But if for some reason they're small enough, they might throw up a flag in like the Department of Revenue system. The Department of Revenue would contact the landowner, and the landowner could reach out to the renter and ask them to provide proof of sales receipts. That doesn't happen very often, but the actual rent itself does not calculate into that.
It's the production.
It's the
Yes.
production, yeah. But payments from programs like EQIP, CRP, CSP, all of those payments do count towards gross farm revenue. So if you participate in any of those, that would count towards those receipts. It's just not rent.
Yep. And if anybody has any other questions during our presentation, feel free to speak up.
So they could count their operator's revenue as revenue for the land, so then their land could be eligible if it was
Correct.
a person that had retired from farming and now rents it out only.
Yep.
So, okay.
Yeah. And we always encourage folks that are renting out their land to have that conversation with their renter beforehand, just to say, hey, this is something that I'm interested interested in doing. One, because the conversation is gonna have to include, hey, for this program to participate, I'm gonna need a nutrient management plan, so they'll have to discuss the process of that. But two, hey, I just wanna make sure that you're meeting this gross farm revenue requirement, and if I could provide your information to DOR in case they have questions. But we always encourage that you have those conversations. We can't force you to, but we heavily encourage it so you don't, wreck your relationship with your renter.
All right, so in addition to that gross farm revenue requirement, there are a couple of other basic requirements to claim the tax credit. So of course, meeting those state soil and water conservation standards, which we will go through in a little bit more detail here in a minute. This tax credit is also only available to Wisconsin residents, and it is of course divvied up through land ownership, so only Wisconsin residents and the owners of the land that it's being claimed on. And then in addition, if you are already claiming the homestead or veterans and surviving spouses property tax credit, you cannot claim this one just so there's no, overlapping of tax credits.
The one thing to note is that if you have an entity or a trust, you still can claim under this program as long as that entity or trust was formed under Wisconsin state law.
LLCs, trusts, etc.
So, yeah, I highlighted that. So I highlighted this because our biggest limiting factor for why people don't enter into this program are the soil and water conservation compliance standards. So doing the nutrient management plan and getting into compliance, we find is the biggest limiting factor to why people are not participating in this program.
Yeah, just to roughly an idea, so that map I held up earlier with the whole statewide presence of the program, we have a little over 7 million acres total, either in zoning or an ag enterprise area. So 7 million acres of people that could participate in the program, and we see about 2 million acres every year. So 20-some% of people, and that's why what are they saying? The biggest barrier is usually if someone's not already doing nutrient management, that's a bit of a barrier to entry for them.
Are the nutrient management standards more restrictive under a farmland preservation than it's not part of a farmland preservation plan?
No, it's the same.
Their standards are the same.
Standard, yep. So that's a good segue because the next slide is talking about those soil and water conservation standards. The biggest one is, of course, the nutrient management plan. That is a standard that Wisconsin sets and then reviews every so often that is based on a federal standard from USDA NRCS. So right now, the current standard was established in 2015, which is, I think, currently under review. But as it stands, yes, like if you were participating in any other state program or you just had, a certified crop advisor already writing your nutrient management plan, it would be the same thing. So beyond that nutrient management plan, there are some other conservation requirements essentially. Those specific to crop and pasture land are tolerable soil loss. So there's a measurement called T that you calculate out basically saying that if there is any soil coming off of your field, it's within the tolerable range and not too much, so you're not having high erosion, essentially. There's also a tillage setback, meaning that you're not tilling right up to the edge of a creek or riverbank, so that you're not further eroding that bank than what it does naturally. And then a phosphorus index is a little bit more complicated, but basically making sure that they're not over applying phosphorus to your land, so that any soil that does run off into a waterway is not contributing to nutrient pollution in that waterway. There are some livestock operation specific ones, primarily towards runoff on like a barn lot. So preventing significant discharges, which is a bit of an ambiguous term, but basically you kind of know it when you see it. Any sort of wastewater, milk center waste, feed pad waste, of course waste storage runoff is included in that, to make sure that it's not entering any bodies of water, any creeks, streams, ditches, etc. And then limiting livestock access to open bodies of water so that there is always vegetative cover. If you have a livestock crossing, for example, or a creek for your pasture, making sure that the banks are either fenced off to limit access, or that you have some engineered crossings so that livestock aren't in there eroding the banks back again further than what they would naturally do. And then, of course, any manure storage pits, embankments, stacking pads, etc. that you have on your property, just there's standards to make sure that they're not leaching, leaking, or running off any, rainwater into, again, waters of the state.
But yeah, if you're already in compliance with these things, you would already be meeting one of the hardest things to hit, or the biggest roadblock to participating in this program.
Yep, and of course, you'd always be working with the county conservation office to, do a walkthrough of your farm, especially if it's your first time, see, where some problems might be had and what the options are to fix that. Because oftentimes there is cost share or something else available to become compliant with those standards.
All right, so we want to get a farmer's perspective on how participating in the Farmland Preservation Program is. So we're going to have Adam come up and talk about his experience participating in Lafayette County. Thank you so much.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam Moore, and I dairy farm in the Gratiot area of Lafayette County with my wife and my parents. And I was asked by Tanya to share my experience with the program. I recently enrolled a farm that I own in the program in 2024. And I enrolled 108 acres in the program, and I definitely think the program is worth it for most landowners. My parents have had their home farm enrolled in the program for probably 15 years, so I was somewhat familiar with how the program works and the benefits before I started the process. And like many farmers, I like to think I already utilize effective practices to preserve the soil and keep our streams and rivers clean. So I expected the program to be a benefit for my farm as well. I contacted the Land Conservation Department of my county, and they made the process to enroll really easy. I contacted them in the spring of 2024, and they take care of most of the application work, and then we did an in-person inspection of the farm in the fall. After passing the inspection, I received a certificate of compliance in November of 2024. And that lists the tax parcels associated with the farm right on it. And you can give that to your tax professional, and he takes care of deducting the tax credit from your taxes. The tax credit varies. I got $10 an acre in 2024, and then I'm able to sign a 10-year agreement for 25, so I'll get $12.50 an acre for 2025. Is this program worth it? I believe it is. Compliance is not difficult. After the initial inspection in person, you at least in Lafayette County, you self-certify for the next 4 years. In the off years, you just fill out a form with most of the requirements that were listed on the PowerPoint and check whether you're following or not following those guidelines. And then you send a $35 check to the county every year, and you remain in compliance. In terms of the conservation and compliance requirements for the program, I dairy farm, and we have manure storage on the farm, so it was convenient as many of the requirements for this program are already requirements we have to meet as we have a permitted manure storage. These include having the nutrient management plan on file with the county, which we already were doing. We pay Inside FS to fill ours out. I know they're not that hard to fill out on your own. We pay Inside FS, and they charge $2.50 or $3 an acre to fill it out properly. The other standards to follow that they listed, we already followed as well. We have 2 farms that we rent from other landowners, and both of those landowners have their farms enrolled in the program as well. On one farm, we as the tenants, we provide the work for the nutrient management plan and pay for that. So that's kind of a service we think we offer as the farmer to help the landowner be in compliance. We're doing most of the work already. On another farm, they own a septic business, and they spread septic waste on some of the farms, so they pay for the nutrient management plan, and then we offer to pay for the soil testing, so they don't have to incur that cost. That's all I got. It's a good program, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Adam.
All right. The annual fee to self-certify is something that not every county does, so it's something that Greene County let's say, if they were to get, some participants would decide if that was, you know, something they wanted to do. Some of the counties that have a lot of participation, like Lafayette, I think maybe Dane does it too, use it as like a processing fee so they can cover the time it takes to go through all those people. But certainly it's not like a state requirement.
All right, so we have two different agricultural enterprise area petition processes, and depending on where you guys were to decide where to put an agricultural enterprise area would depend on which petition process you would go through. And at the top end of this, I should say that agricultural enterprise areas aren't meant to cover an entire county. You can definitely cover multiple townships at a time, but the intent is not to cover a whole county in one fell swoop. We're looking at more targeted areas. So with that in mind, we do also have an acreage cap on the number of acres that we're eligible to, or that we as a department are able to designate as agricultural enterprise area, and that's 2 million acres. We're currently at a little bit over 1.6 million acres, and we anticipate reaching our cap in the next 3 years. So when you're thinking about that, just know, you know, where are we going to get the most impact out of our AEA, and also when do we petition so we can be in that acreage cap before we hit the cap there. So depending on where you put your petition, you have these two options. First is a new agricultural enterprise area petition, which creates a brand new AEA that is completely unique to your community. It allows the community petitioning for the AEA to develop new goals and plans to protect agricultural and conservation in that area. And it's basically a blank slate for you to go forward and put your, you know, own unique takes on what you want that AEA to look like. Between the two, a new AEA petition has a longer petition narrative process because there's a lot of work that needs to be done to set up what the petition looks like, or what the area looks like, give an introduction to the area, talk about land use trends, because DADCAP and our review committee have not seen your area before. We haven't interacted with your area before, so there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that end. So the petition process for this, or the petition narrative for this, is a little bit longer. Then we have our modification AEA petition, which would be eligible if you were to go basically anywhere on the western side of the county. You are neighbored up next to the Tectonica AEA in Lafayette County, or the Southwest Lead Mine Region AEA, kind of in the southeastern portion of Lafayette County. So you would have the option to do a modification petition. This expands an already existing AEA and builds upon existing goals and plans. So what the community here would do if you were looking to petition for the AEA is look at that current petition and say, hey, do we feel like this AEA represents our needs, our wants, our desires for our agricultural community, and should be expanded outwards into our area? This petition process is longer in that it requires you to get signature pages from the existing municipalities that are already covered by the AEA. So all of the townships that are already currently covered by one of those AEAs would also have to sign on to your modification petition. So while the petition application narrative or modification petition is shorter because you're building on an existing petition, the legwork might be a little bit longer, especially if you have some townships that are harder to contact or are more hesitant to sign on for that kind of change. So there's pros and cons to each of them, and it's really dependent on where your AEA is located. If you decide to do something on the eastern side of your county, you wouldn't have the option to do a modification petition. You have to already be, or the AEA has to touch the current petition, or the current AEA in order for you to modify. So regardless of what your petition is, all petitions have the same 5 main components. That's not going to change. Some of the questions might change, some of the people you talk to might change, but the 5 main components do not change. So first and foremost, we require a completed petition application, and that's where we get our petition narrative. So it's a series of questions that ask you things like, introduce the area that you're proposing this AEA. Why is this area important to you? What does the local community look like? What are the local land use trends in the area? How are you anticipating change happening over time? What other land use controls do you have? Are you already participating in the conservation compliance? Are you guys doing nutrient management planning? And then what are your goals for supporting your agricultural enterprise area? A lot of that information can already be pulled from the local land and water conservation plan, the Farmland Preservation Plan. If you have a producer-led watershed group, they can pull in their goals and their information. So there's a lot of places to pull information so you're not duplicating work, but this is the place to aggregate it, put it in there. The next thing is that each petition needs 5 petitioning landowners. The rule of thumb that we give is you need a minimum of 5 petitioning landowners per township for the review committee to feel comfortable and confident that that AEA can go through. So if you're looking at just doing 1 township, you know, look at the goal as being 5. If you're going to do 3 townships, look at the goal as being 15. Of course, the more petitioners you get, the stronger your petition is going to be. For modification petitions, you can ask current participants or previous petitioners to sign on as landowner petitioners for your petition, so you have a larger group of people to pull from. So you can ask people who already have a farmland preservation agreement in Lafayette County to sign on as a petitioner for a modification petition, whereas you can't do that for a new petition. Number 3 is you need a map of the proposed AEA and a GIS layer. So this is going to be something where you guys will probably work pretty closely with the county to help produce. The map has to be contiguous, meaning that all the parcels identified in the map share a common boundary and are not otherwise separated except for roads, utility right-of-ways, and small bodies of water, so streams, creeks, things like that. And it has to be based off of your farmland preservation plan. So the petitioners don't have to be neighbors. They can be spread out all over a township or all over an area. But the boundary you draw around those petitioners has to be contiguous. Excuse me. Okay. So, so the goal of your AEA map is that you're going to be grabbing more landowners than just the petitioners, because you're going to need to bridge those petitioners together. So really, as a petitioner, you're making the opportunity for you and your neighbors to participate in this program. So ideally, your map should have like a good spread of where the petitioners are located. You know, you shouldn't draw a boundary around an area where all of your petitioners are located up at the top and you don't have anybody at the bottom. It might be better to cut that off where you have a strong group of petitioners that are willing to participate in the program versus an area where you just don't have a lot of interest. So thinking about that when you're working through that. Next are our signature pages. So in addition to having petitioner signatures, we also need signature pages from the County Land Conservation Department. Each town that the AEA covers, and each county that the AEA covers. And additionally, we need non-petitioning cooperator signature pages. Now, these are technically not a requirement, but the review committee has been very vocal about wanting to see more participation from non-petitioning cooperators. So they've asked that petitions that are coming forward have about 2 to 3 signature pages. And these non-petitioning cooperators are going to be your partners. So if you have a producer-led watershed, they can sign on as a non-petitioning cooperator. If you have partners with other non-for-profit organizations like Pheasants Forever, Ducks Unlimited, folks like that, they can sign on as non-petitioning cooperators. And if there is a CCA that's really involved in the community, they can sign on as a non-petitioning cooperator. Local co-ops, local tractor supply stores, feed supply stores, you know, anything like that, those folks can sign on. They don't have to be within the boundary of the AEA, they can just be a community supporter, so maybe they're located here in Monroe and your, proposed AEA is over, in the town of Jefferson. You know, it's fine, they can still sign on as a non-petitioning cooperator, they just wanna see that there's a wider support for agriculture within the area. The review committee wants to see that. And then the last thing is that we do have a recorded petition interview with the petitioner and the Land Conservation Department. Those are a 10 to 15 minute interview where we sit down after the petition narrative has already been written and kind of go through some of those questions. And so the review committee has the opportunity to kind of meet somebody in the community and bring back that human aspect, because they've said that the petition kind of sanitizes what the community is, and they want to reconnect with the people that they're putting through these petitions for. So just to give you an idea of what a timeline typically looks like for an AEA petition, you guys are already on the right track. So in the spring, we usually encourage folks to hold a public meeting to discuss AEA and see if it's right for their community. Next, it's meeting with town officials and gathering signature pages from petitioners. So talking with your local towns and saying, hey, you know, we're interested in this program, is this something you would support? In summer of 2025, we'd be working on finalizing your map and the petition narrative and the other content there. We'd look to schedule the petitioner interview sometime in mid to late June, and then you gather any additional signature pages or get on the schedule for any town or county meetings to get those signature pages. Lastly, we do offer the opportunity to review any petitions that are going up for that year. I look through them and give feedback and notes on what my experience has been with the review committee to let you know, hey, I think you're doing a really great job here, but in this area you might want to add additional content, just because I've worked with them for so many years, I know kind of where they're going to have questions and where they're going to be really impressed by things. This year, petitions are due on August 1st. After petitions are turned in, I talked about them a lot, but they're reviewed by our AEA Petition Review Committee. It's a committee of industry professionals that come together from different areas representing the Towns Association, County Land Conservation Departments. We have somebody from the Cereal Byproducts Company, we have somebody from the Dairy Business Association, and then we have somebody from Compeer Financial all sitting together. They review the petitions and make their decision based off of that. There's no state employee that sits on the review committee as a, you know, a voting member or anything like that. We just sit there to take notes and to present the petition. Once they review the petition, they'll make their recommendation to the secretary who reviews the recommendations, and then he'll sign the designation order, which would put an AEA into effect January 1st the following year. So once we get through this whole process, once your AEA has been designated, you would be eligible to start enrolling your lands into a farmland preservation agreement on January 1st of next year. So in 2026, you would be eligible. So there's a little bit of a process here. Unfortunately, we couldn't get you eligible for 2025, but at least this would set you up for 2026. But that's the basic process that we have, and that is what we have about agricultural enterprise areas. Do you guys have any questions for us?
Being a petitioner does not commit you to putting your land in a farm preservation.
Correct, correct. And we made that very clear on the actual petition page, that signing on as a petitioner is not committing you to enrolling your land in a farmland preservation agreement. Signing on as a petitioner means that you're interested in petitioning for the AEA only, that you support it for your community and you want to make it eligible for yourself maybe in the future or for your neighbors to make that choice after it's been designated. But yeah, if you sign on as a petitioner, we're not going to come knocking on your door and say, okay, here's your agreement, you got to sign it now.
I'm assuming the speaker's land was already in an AEA when he signs up for the farmland preservation?
Yes, yeah, and you're in the Southwest Leadline Region AEA?
I think I mentioned it, like my parents' farm is in Gratiot Township, that's the one AEA, in Wyoto Township where my farm was in a separate.
Okay, yeah,
So to approach this on a township level, it would be best to apply for everything that's contingent, that's ag land.
yeah, I mean, it would be as long as you don't anticipate any growth in an area, or you don't have any reason to not include something. I should mention that large scale, renewable energy facilities are not allowed to be enrolled in an agreement. So if there's a large scale solar facility or a large scale wind facility in an area, those lands that are covered by, the physical elements, structures, those are not able to be enrolled into an agreement. So if there's an area of the township where you have one of those facilities going in, you may choose to exclude it. But otherwise, yeah, enrolling a whole township with everything that's eligible is a really popular way of doing an AEA boundary. Actually, most of our AEAs follow township boundary lines.
To say existing wind or solar, you can't enroll. Let's say you have an AEA, and then farms sign up to be, or get agreements in place. Now, that would prevent them from getting solar and wind on their land as well, correct?
Correct, yeah. So if your land is covered by an agreement, you can't enroll it into a large-scale renewable energy contract without first releasing your land from that agreement. The release fee is 3 times the highest grade soil based off of the DOR use value guidelines for agricultural assessment for the time and year your land is located in. We take that number and multiply it by 3, and it's a really big way of saying it's going to cost between $9,000 and $2,000 to release land, depending on where your land is located in. But Greene County tends to err on the $2,000 per acre side because your land is rated so highly.
$900 and $2,000.
$900 to $2,000, yeah. So it'll cost somewhere around $2,000 per acre to release land from the agreement. We have heard from some facilities that they would be willing to release land, for the purpose of signing, a contract, but we don't work with any of those facilities to release land. So just something to think about.
If land is in an AEA, is that a conflict if the person wants to put land in a conservation easement?
Nope, they're compatible programs. And we worked with USDA, with NRCS and FSA on some of their easement programs to make sure that it goes through, that we have memorandums of understanding saying like, first and foremost, USDA easements come first, and then, they can do whatever they need to do first before they come in. But we have a lot of folks that are covered with a Farmland Preservation Agreement who are also involved in like the CREP program, or have land in WRP easements, or even have land in one of the state-owned agricultural conservation easements. So,
Okay, let's say you're in an AEA, you have a Farmland Preservation Program, and you want to put your land in a conservation easement. Is there a conflict there?
no.
The terms of the agreement for farmland preservation are already restricted to agricultural, open space, etc. So another conservation easement on top would just be sort of doubling down on those limitations.
Yeah, and we have, again, worked with other programs to make sure and ensure that there's no conflict. From our end, we don't see any conflict for the purpose of, like, DATCAP and enforcing our agreement. We would never go after somebody because they decided to enroll some of their land into an easement program.
Yes.
This is kind of directed to Adam. I don't understand, our farmland preservation zoning status in the county. Do you have it? Do you not?
Well,
Explain how that works.
Todd, correct me if I'm wrong. But, so farmland preservation historically works two ways, through farmland preservation zoning. I grew up in Lafayette County, actually interned there, doing farmland preservation spot checks. So they have some lands that's zoned farmland preservation. If you go to Iowa County, almost the whole county is zoned farmland preservation. That was probably a decision that was made, I would assume, around 1970. Our zoning started between 1968 and 1970. I would assume back then there was a discussion, Greene County decided to go the second option, which used to be long-term agreements, I think is what they were. So the long-term agreement process went out, I just talked to Todd last week, I thought it was 10 years ago, but I think it was closer to 15.
Yeah, it was in 2009 when that program switched over.
So there's zoning, we just have general ag zoning. 95% of the county is zoned general ag, which allows for a lot of stuff. One of the major differences you're gonna find between farmland preservation zoning and the way Greene County does general ag zoning is the number of houses. You know, we allow, you get up north of 69 on that corridor, north from New Glarus to Madison border, you know, the house after house after house. You know, I think you couldn't really do that if it would have been zoned farmland preservation. So we don't have farmland preservation zoning. We have a few contracts, I believe, left.
Yep.
And then we would go to the AEAs if it works. Just because I'm standing here talking, you know, the zoning committee that we have now is very open to listen to people. I'm not saying they would change and want to do a farmland preservation zoning chapter or district, I guess is the word. But again, they're open. I look, Nick's here. Nick's on the zoning committee. Town and Monroe, Nick? Yes. Sue was on zoning committee for a while. Christy was on zoning committee. The last 4 to 6 years, the zoning committee has been very active in updating their ordinances. Most of those ordinance changes have come from the community. They come through, you know, the constituents to the zoning committee. So the zoning committee, I'm sure, would be open to listen if we wanted to do an ordinance. I did a little reading last week. It seems like there's example ordinances out there that have to be certified by DADCAP. Correct me if I'm bouncing things wrong.
Yep, yes, we have examples, but basically the state has the maximum amount of stuff that you can allow in a farmland preservation zoning district, and then you can tailor that however you want to within those confines. So we have some counties or towns that allow for some residential development within those boundaries and some that don't, and have another district for it. But yes, it would be certified by us for a 10-year term, much like the farmland preservation plan.
And then just to follow on something that Wednesday said is, you know, every district, whether it's the commercial district, the agricultural district, the ed district, has allowed uses, has conditional uses, and they have the uses that aren't allowed. So if you take Decatur Township and you put the whole township in a different zoning, you have farmland preservation zoning, all the uses, there were uses that were allowed under the old ordinance that aren't going to be allowed under the new district. So you're going to take, you could argue it's a taking of some uses. You may not be able to build as many houses or something like that. And then some of the uses that are existing there, you might have an existing business that wouldn't be allowed in the new zoning district. It basically becomes a legal non-conforming district, so there's a whole slew of moving parts, I guess. Does that answer your question about being too long lane? But thank you.
But underneath that scenario, if you have a comprehensive plan in your township, and they already have designated areas which would be set aside for residential development, you would not want to include that in your AE8 application. Am I right or wrong?
So this is sort of where the farmland preservation plan that Greene County just completed comes into place, because that's supposed to be, it's like a translation of that comprehensive plan or all those local comprehensive plans, and then just divvying it up into farmland or non-farmland.
Yeah.
So that's what we use. So only those areas that are in green on that map would be eligible to be in an AEA. Oftentimes, yes, that would exclude residential developments, commercial, any land set aside, like that might be within 1.5 miles of an incorporated area, for example. And same thing with zoning. If there were to, you know, create a new farmland preservation zoning district, it could only cover those same green areas from the Farmland Preservation Plan. So, yeah, you of course wouldn't put a Farmland Preservation zoning district on like an actively zoned commercial or industrial parcel, because it would already be excluded from this.
But you mentioned a mile and a half, which is the distance that a town can branch out into townships.
Yeah, that's
You wouldn't wanna put anything within that mile and a half, is what you're saying?
No, it's not that you don't have to, that's what some places use, that's like the extraterritorial authority, where some incorporated areas can exercise zoning over that. Not every incorporated area does, but some places just call that like future growth or urban service areas and just exclude those from the Farmland Preservation Plan. I don't believe any of the incorporated areas were excluded like that now, but like let's say, you know, Broadhead at some point wanted to exercise that, and Decatur had an AEA that was in here or something, that would just be a change that would be reflected the next time the plan came through in the 10-year cycle. So the plan would be like, okay, well, Broadhead wants to develop this mile and a half around their current boundary, so we're gonna exclude that from the plan, and that would make future agreements ineligible.
But if you put it in the plan, it would be an incentive for them not to wanna go to there.
Correct.
Correct.
The one thing I should note too is our farmland preservation agreements also preclude agreement holders from special assessment for sewer and water. So if you are in one of those areas that could be affected, it does an extra incentive. I don't usually talk about it, but it is something in there. So if you have an agreement, you're exempt for the term of your agreement from special assessment for sewer and water. So like if they expanded a district into your area, then for that period of time you would be exempt.
Yep, and like you said, if the, you know, the city or the village of Broadhead was looking to expand, they saw that they had, you know, half a dozen agreement holders along one boundary, they might look at that like, oh, this land cannot come out of agricultural use, so we will not annex or exercise our extraterritorial authority over that area. It's certainly not a guarantee, but you're correct that the public process to create this map and then get an AEA petition and have those landowners sign an agreement, that's not nothing that holds some weight or should to a committee.
So this map of green and white, the white is not eligible, was developed using a LISA model of a land use what does it stand for, Todd?
Land evaluation site analysis.
There we go. So it was completely done by GIS, like, we didn't say, oh, this guy isn't gonna be in it, or he's not a good farmer. It is not that at all. It's completely by parcel, by the GIS, you know, by computing that. And so what's white is not eligible for getting into an AEA or an agreement.
And if it were to come to, you know, where, you know, because these lease analysis are countywide and they're oftentimes automated, there might be some little nitpicky things that, you know, might be better, like a farmstead was excluded, but it's still part of the farm. We see that sometimes. These maps can be amended, like in the case that, you know, a town were to come through on an AEA and one of the petitioners who was interested potentially in signing an agreement is excluded, you know, in the white area. As long as the county agreed that, oh yeah, it was excluded maybe by mistake, or you know, for whatever reason, these maps could be amended, you know, during this 10-year time period. They're not set in concrete, but it's just like an amendment process where we come through, look at what the proposed changes is, and make sure that it makes sense given what the county has laid out in the plan.
So you can amend the LISA exclusions with that it's part of the rest of the farm or something like that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, because we don't expect you to go parcel by parcel for the whole county, because that would take
1 million years.
a terrible amount of time. But that's to allow for some changes over the course of that 10-year period if it's appropriate.
Other questions? Everyone want to sign up to be petitioner?
I do have some samples that I put in the back. They might have been taken, but we do have samples of what farmland preservation agreements look like. The terms on that sample do not change. It is like the standard terms for what an agreement looks like. If for whatever reason There's not any back there for you guys to look at. We do have those available on our website, so you can go on there. Our website is farmlandpreservation.wi.gov. That also includes all of the petitioner materials, petition application, and all of that. But yeah, if you do wanna read through, is that one of the samples, Don?
That's the only one.
Okay, but yeah, if you wanna read through what the actual terms of the Farmland Preservation Agreement are, you can go ahead and read that. I don't know, a couple years ago, we updated the agreements to be a 10-year term, not a 15-year term, so there's a chance that that one says 15 years, but rest assured it is only 10 years.
Unless you wanna sign up for longer.
Yeah, you do have that option. You can sign up for 50 years if you want. I might ask you if you're sure about that, but yeah, those terms don't change, so if you wanna just read through that, feel free.
So I have your names and emails, so we'll be in communication. If you guys have questions, you wanna take this back to your townships and talk about it, your neighbors, if they're interested, make sure we know, so, I mean, just plainly, if we're looking at, you know, where you all are from, I'm gonna say, well, definitely there's some interest here, but I don't know if I can stretch my boundary up here, or, you know, so we have to, you know, make sure people are interested, that we're getting them on the map, so we include them, because we're limited, you know, we shouldn't say, oh, well, we should include this because it's part of the county. Well, there's nobody to include up there, so Wednesday would want to see us, you know, be kind of tight to our people, that we wouldn't do big open areas. Make sense?
And it needs to be a contiguous boundary, but not every parcel or landowner within it has to be in agreement or be a petition.
Correct, yeah.
It just makes them eligible.
Right.
Yeah, so like if we were gonna use this area as an example, we would draw a boundary that would kind of come around, and everyone, including those people who are petitioners, and say it's all of our dots, would be eligible. So it would be you, all your neighbors, if you have family in there too who didn't sign up as a petitioner, they would be eligible in the future to enroll to an agreement.
And just by being in an AA doesn't, you know, impose any land use restrictions on those people, which is a question like, I wanna support this, but I don't wanna restrict my land in any way, shape, or form. That's fine, because you only restrict it if you go ahead and sign the agreement.
So Tanya and Todd, I wanna get this started in Decatur. Do you guys present to the township people? Is it best to do it as part of a township regular meeting, or a special meeting, or?
I could talk on that. I've gone to a couple of township meetings, and we've had a lot of success from doing that, especially if you advertise it ahead of time and bring some of the folks in, like other farmers and landowners into the township for that. But yeah, that's where I see a lot of success.
That's the key, because you get 3 or 4 people go to a township meeting.
Yes.
Yeah. But most of these have started with a town hall meeting with the town board, because then it's a good time to also talk to the town board about the program too, and get them on board and get their signature page.
I'll be in touch.
Sounds good.
Farmland Preservation,
What?
the website.
Oh, it's farmlandpreservation.wi.gov. And then I have my business cards back there too, and I think it also has our URL on there as well. At least has my phone number on there, and my email, so you can call me or email me if you can't get the link.
Any other questions while you have us here? All right, well, thanks for coming.
Thank you, we appreciate your time.